It's shameful that in Australia in 2021, some men still don't get it. They think they can treat women any way they want. Joel Bienke is one of those men, accused of violence or intimidation by more than 20 women all over the country. At last count, there were nearly a dozen different domestic violence orders against him. Not that he seems to care one bit. Bienke's case highlights how broken the system has become and how powerless the law is to stop serial offenders like him walking the streets. Watch his TikTok videos and you'd think Joel Bienke was a lovable rogue. A smile, a cheeky wink, and of course no shortage of the seemingly obligatory gym selfies. But his charm offensive online is very much at odds with reality.
You want to know why I just shoved you? Because you can't seem to get anything through your fucking head!
I believe you've brought something to show me today.
That was the knife that was used to threaten me.
Coral Lee knows all too well the initial excitement and eventual horror of going out with Joel Bienke. She met him in South Australia in 2019.
He said that he'd worked on cattle stations, he'd been a diesel mechanic in the mines, that he was working on one of South Australia's biggest sheep farmers' stations, that he'd had a crazy ex-girlfriend.
If you go back through the checklist now about everything that he told you at the outset, how much of that is true?
None of it.
Initially, he presented himself as someone Coral Lee could see a future with. But as soon as he had her interested, their relationship changed from promising to petrifying, with Joel Bienke draining Coral Lee financially while also filling her with fear. What about that period sticks in your mind?
Probably the violence and the threats. That would be the bit that you've got to sort of live with every day.
Nothing demonstrates just how terrifying this man is, quite like hearing him in full flight. Coral Lee managed to record one of his violent explosions.
Walk away now.
All the next thing I do is knock your fucking teeth in. When a bloke says to me, "Leave the fuck alone," you need to leave him the fuck alone, but you can't seem to get that through your fucking head. Get it through your fucking head and start listening. You'll be fucking better off.
How do you feel when you listen back to that recording?
Sick. Absolutely nauseated by it. I can barely get through a couple of minutes of just the sound of his voice saying to me a couple of words just turns me.
The recording is confronting enough, but what makes this story even more disturbing is that this wasn't an isolated incident, not even close. We've been investigating Joel Bienke for 3 months and have uncovered an appalling history of domestic violence allegations against the 29-year-old, with victims all over the country. How many charges he still has pending in your state at the moment? Joel Bienke appears to follow the same well-practiced routine every time. He uses dating apps and social media to charm women with promises of a future together, but it doesn't take long for him to turn. He demands money and, in some cases, has managed to con thousands, even tens of thousands, out of his girlfriends. Then the campaign of intimidation begins, and he bombards these women he supposedly loves with threatening messages. In most cases, the damage is done in a matter of weeks before he swiftly moves on to the next girl. How would you sum up Joel's personality?
Evil. He's manipulative. He lies. He's not anything that he makes out to be. I don't think he even has a personality. He is a giant ball of negativity that will destroy your life.
For more than a decade, he's bounced from one place to another. We've traced his movements from Western Australia on to New South Wales, then Victoria, back to New South Wales, and from there, South Australia. He's now in Queensland. Of the 21 women who've shared their story with us, 15 have gone to police about Joel Bienke's behaviour. 9 have been granted intervention orders, and numerous convictions have been recorded against him. But perhaps worse than Joel Bienke's record is the way that authorities in this country respond to offences of this nature. And the reality is that women have very few protections. Intervention orders don't actually register on someone's criminal record, so that means the bulk of Joel Bienke's behaviour isn't recognised by police. Now, when he does break the law, there's no guarantee that police will act then either, because quite often he just skips the state before they get a chance to catch him. And when convictions have been recorded, generally he's been punished with a slap on the wrist. Joel.
Yes.
Tom Steinford from 60 Minutes. Are you up to your old tricks in Brisbane these days?
About what? Regarding what?
Right now, there are actually 2 outstanding warrants for Bienke's arrest. But here he is, still on the streets, free to meet other women. What do you say to those women that have accused you of violence and taking them for a ride?
Police.
You're calling the police. I've seen it all. What are the holes in the system here that allow this to keep on happening?
Unfortunately, it is like Swiss cheese, really. There are so many holes.
Hayley Foster is the CEO of Women's Safety New South Wales. And she says the system fails to protect women. If you rob a bank 20 times, you get dealt with as a repeat offender. But if you get 20 intervention orders taken out against you, you get dealt with like it's your first one.
Yeah, that's right. There's no other crime where this is allowed to happen.
Coral Lee went to police, and Joel Bienke was convicted of assaulting her. She was also granted an intervention order. That order technically protected her, but it means nothing to any other women he sets his sights on.
Well, Joel is a con artist. His job is to be a con artist, so he's got very good over the years in manipulating women and telling them exactly what they want to hear.
Sam met Joel in Adelaide just a few months after he was convicted of assaulting Coral Lee. Early days, what did you think of Joel?
Within the first couple of days, I thought he was lovely. You know, he was charming. He came across really nice, said all the right things. You know, we laughed and we had such a good time.
What do you think Joel wanted from you?
I think Joel just wanted an ATM.
Just like he did with Coral Lee, Joel charmed Sam before conning her out of cash. She estimates she spent more than $10,000 in their first 3 weeks together, on the assurance he'd pay her back. That money never came, but as their relationship developed, he became increasingly controlling.
He would literally take my phone away from me. He would, go through my phone and see who was I messaging, why was I messaging them. He would start fights over that. He would control when I would see my friends, when I would speak to my mother. Every little situation he had to be in control of. I wasn't allowed to drive my car. He had to drive.
Sam knew she needed to get out of the relationship, and that's when Bienke allegedly turned violent. The police were called and he was initially charged with aggravated assault, and an intervention order was taken out, but the assault charge was later dropped. When you went to police, do you feel like they took your complaint seriously enough?
No, not at all. I think that they've put it in the too hard basket, and I just don't really feel like they take any of us all that seriously.
How did you meet Joel?
So he sent me a friend's request on Facebook. I originally ignored it because I thought, I don't know who this person is. And he said he came across my photo and thought I was beautiful and lovely and all that, so he started messaging me.
So many of Joel Bienke's victims are fearful of revealing their identities, but these women agreed to share their trauma. It's been 2 years since Renee went out with him, but the scars are still so raw for her.
So I was scared. I feared my life. So I went to the police and said, what can I do about this? Help me. I want this guy stopped from being able to contact me. All they did was took notes, put it on his name and sent me away. And I was literally an absolute mess at the police station. How they could turn me away, I don't know, but they did.
You honestly feared for your life?
Yeah, I did. And my job, my family.
You thought he was capable of harming you?
Yeah, I did.
It's hard. I'd imagine, and this shows how much he still affects you this day or all this time on.
Over almost 2 years later, and it still affects me. You try not let it, but you can't. Sorry.
With a lack of action from authorities, dozens of women have now come together online chasing justice. It seems extraordinary that police haven't caught up with Benke given the arrest warrants out against him. We managed to find him hiding in a new city. Joel.
Yes.
Tom Steinford from 60 Minutes. How are you?
Good, and yourself?
Since we began looking into Joel Benke 3 months ago, the evidence against him has been piling up. Just as he has moved state to state, so too has our investigation. We followed leads all over the country and spoken to more than 20 women who allege deceit, intimidation, and in many cases, violence.
Is it right that he boasted to you about how many women he'd been with?
Yeah, I was told one night that I was number 197.
Did he seem proud of it?
Oh yeah, yeah, really proud of it. A little too proud of it.
Coral Lee has experienced the worst of Joel Benke.
He's the purest form of narcissism I've ever seen.
As a narcissist, then I'd imagine he'll be watching this. What's your message?
Go to hell. You deserve to be there.
At the very least, he probably deserves to be behind bars. Currently, there are 2 outstanding warrants for his arrest in New South Wales. But here he is at a pub in Queensland, free to go about his life. Joel Benke's trail of destruction has led us all over the country, and while authorities have been trying to find him for the last few months unsuccessfully, we've managed to track him down, living in Brisbane's CBD. He's checked into this apartment complex under his own name. Joel.
Yes.
Tom Steinford from 60 Minutes. How are you?
Good, and yourself?
Going well, thanks. You are up to your old tricks in Brisbane these days.
What? Regarding what?
Well, how many intervention orders and domestic violence orders do you now have out against you?
I have absolutely none, mate. So I think you've got the wrong person.
No, you're Joel Benke.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you are.
Joel Gallant.
Benke's victims claim he's a con artist, and instantly he tries to lie his way out of this situation by saying we've got the wrong guy. That is easily disproved. Can we just get a shot of the tattoo on his right leg here so we can match it up? There we go. Joel, your profile online shows that tattoo of you working out in the gym.
I don't have any profiles online, mate.
Next, this man wanted by police in New South Wales asks Queensland police, who are guarding a nearby quarantine hotel, to save him from our questions.
Harassment, I don't know what for. You get these guys off leaving me.
Joel,
I'm more than happy to breach COVID while walking in here. If I go lock in if I have to.
You can't, buddy.
Joel, it's a COVID hotel. You're kidding yourself, mate.
Look, I've got these people walking in here, harassment out of nowhere.
Man, I appreciate your situation.
I don't know what for.
Man, I have no idea either, but you can't come into a private hotel, buddy.
Joel, normally you've got a fair bit of bravado when it comes to dealing with women in your life. Why are you going to water when we approach you?
That's interesting, mate. As I said, I've got no idea what this is about.
Why do you think?
As far as the name you think you've got, it's not me, so that's interesting.
This is a man who clearly lives in denial. But we've actually seen screenshots of the threatening messages that you've sent to women.
That's nice.
We've seen the allegations of domestic violence repeatedly from numerous women across the country.
That's nice, mate.
What do you say to those women that have accused you of violence and taking them for a ride? You're calling the police. I've seen it all. But you're accused of harassment by...
As I said, I'm asking you to leave me be.
You're accused of harassment by numerous women all over the country.
This is private property. Definitely you guys leave me alone. We let New South Wales Police know we'd located Joel and even offered to help them find him as well, so he could be arrested. But to our disappointment and bemusement, we were told that's not possible. The offences that he's wanted for aren't extraditable. So for now, he continues to evade justice. It seems to sum up perfectly why the women in this case feel so let down by the system.
It's a very permissive message that we're sending to offenders at the moment. Essentially, as you've seen in this case, you can get away with it. And we need to make sure we've got stopgaps right throughout the system to ensure that that doesn't happen. But that has to start with understanding it and taking it seriously. Hayley Foster is CEO of Women's Safety New South Wales and is campaigning for changes to the way we deal with this sort of offending in Australia.
The case of Joel Benke almost feels like a window into the bigger situation at the moment.
Indeed. You know, this is essentially the tip of the iceberg. It's really great that 60 Minutes is uncovering this particular case, but at the end of the day, we should not be having women and children in fear and terrorised in their own homes. And there are practical things we can do about it. This is about political will, and it's high time that we, rolled up our sleeves and got the work done.
Do you think we're at a bit of a moment for this country where we're starting to draw a line in the sand for this kind of behaviour?
Absolutely. I think we've seen over the last, 6 to 8 weeks, Australians are not tolerating this anymore. We can't keep putting this in the too hard basket. We can't keep sidelining this as just a women's issue. It's absolutely high time that we place this squarely front and centre as a key national priority to address this issue. And I think Australians have made that loud and clear.
Hayley believes Joel Benke's ability to move from state to state and reoffend illustrates why we now need a national approach to tackling violence against women.
We might be able to keep a bit of an eye on somebody whilst they're in New South Wales or whilst they're in Queensland alone, for example. But if somebody wants to jump the border, it's almost like they're scot-free. They can just go on to reoffend, putting women and children at serious risk in the community. We need to get on and get this national register really quick smart.
Any improvements to the system will come too late to help the brave women who've shared their stories of abuse with us. But for Coral Lee, finding her voice is in itself a victory over this man who's tormented her for so long.
It's like a bad dream that you really don't want to tell anyone happened to you, because I look back now and think, you silly girl, how did you not see it earlier? And at the same time, I have this feeling of, well, I really hope what I'm doing right now saves somebody else, and maybe, just maybe, wakes the system up to doing something about these serial offenders.
I think a lot of people who watch this won't be saying silly girl, they'll be saying good on you for standing up.
Thanks. This is my life, and he didn't finish it. He disrupted it for a little while, but he didn't finish my life. I've got it back.
If this story has raised issues and you need to speak with someone, there is support and counselling available by calling 1-800-RESPECT, which is 1-800-737-732.
Hello, I'm Sarah Arbo. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.